Time is now 9:34 a.m. and a quorum of the board is present. State Board of Education meeting of March 11, 2025 is called to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda in order of priority. Are there any items that board members would like to add or delete from the agenda? Dr. Pugh.
Mr. Chair, I move that we add, I have three items. The first is State Board of Education resolution to provide a pathway for all students, including those with disabilities. And I move that we add this to the agenda.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second? A second from Dr. Pritchett. Dr. Pugh, to you to describe the resolution or to read it into the record.
For some time now, we've definitely been talking about how do we bring the voices of parents, groups like the Autism Coalition and others to the table and address the needs of our special education children. And this resolution gets at that and continuing to make sure that we're hearing those voices, prioritizing, addressing the issues and concerns of parents that we've been hearing over the years as it relates to special education. We recently passed a resolution that talked about funding from the federal government that we never saw the resources or the funding that has been promised from the federal government. We've also continued to advocate for resources, dollars to address those needs in the classrooms. And in this current climate that we're in, we need to make sure that our voices are heard loud and clear as it relates to prioritizing those needs, making sure that those resources are not going away, making sure that we're organizing those in the field, parents, as well as the department, to make sure that we're providing the best support for our children with special needs.
We have a motion and a second. Dr. Pugh and Dr. Pritchett on special education. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. If we could have a roll call. Yes, please.
I'd like to participate in discussion. I'm looking forward to adding this to the agenda, but certainly recommending some amendments to make sure that it is a resolution that's really impacting our current special education landscape.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Snyder. Dr. Pugh, anything else for the good of the group? Hearing and seeing none. If we could have a roll call vote on adding this motion to the agenda.
Bullock?
Yes.
McMillan?
Yes.
Pritchett?
Yes.
Pugh?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
And Tilly?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Dr. Pugh, to you for your second motion.
The second motion that I have here is a resolution of the Michigan State Board of Education defending public education, civil rights, and democracy against executive orders and directives that threaten our children and communities. I move that we add this to the agenda.
So we have a motion from Dr. Pugh. Do we have a second? We have a second from Dr. Robinson. Dr. Pugh, to you for a description or a reading.
We have people across the country, definitely within the state. I can't take too many steps without parents, community persons being concerned about what is happening to our education system as a result of the directives and executive orders that keep coming out of the White House and out of Washington, D.C., and adding our voice to make sure that the residents as well as boards and others within the education sphere, parents and children will know that the State Board of Education, the Michigan Department of Education, is doing everything that we can to make sure that we provide safe, supportive environments for our children, and that we're fighting so that our children's schools are not defunded.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. So we have a motion from Dr. Pugh, a second by Dr. Robinson. Do we have any other discussion associated with putting this on the agenda? Ms. Snyder.
Yes, is this resolution in response to the EO that's protecting young girls and women in education? Is this what this is in response to?
This resolution is in response to making sure that our children have the best future ahead of them, that they can go to classrooms and go to schools and know that they will not, uh, to know that they will be protected and that our schools will be safe environments and that our schools will eventually one day be funded in a way that we show that we prioritize our children and that we don't get caught up in petty politics.
Yeah, that's a bit of a non-answer, so I'm looking forward to debating this because it does say against executive orders, and there is a recent executive order that is very much rooted in the spirit of protecting the rights of young girls and women in education and is not a political stunt, but rather something that many people support. So I will.
This is simply a discussion about putting it on the agenda.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I will pass on adding it to the agenda, but I'm very much looking forward to the discussion on what it really looks like to have diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools.
Very good. Do we have any other discussion? Roll call vote on adding this motion to the agenda.
Bullock,
Yes.
McMillan,
No.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
and Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Dr. Pugh, to you for your third motion.
This is March. March is Reading Month, and I'm so happy that we have this opportunity to join with our legislators. And this resolution that I move is in support of cursive writing education in Michigan schools. The science that continues to come out supports cursive writing and the need for cursive writing, and we can talk about that more if this bill is added to the agenda and be able to support legislation that has been proposed by legislators and hoping and in anticipation of them again proposing cursive writing legislation and us showing our support for that.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Dr. Robinson. Is there any discussion about adding this to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Bullock,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
and Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much, Board. Dr. Robinson, I believe you have a motion as well.
Yes, March is also Music in Our Schools Month, so I have a resolution here in support of music in our state schools. We will have a presentation this morning from the Executive Director of the Michigan Music Education Association and a policy scholar from Michigan State. The resolution is in support of the content of their presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. We have a motion from Dr. Robinson. We have a second from Dr. Pugh. Is there any discussion about adding this to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Bullock,
Yes.
McMillan,
Yes.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
and Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Board, if I could have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as amended.
So
Dr.
moved.
Pritchett moves and Dr. Robinson seconds. Is there any discussion associated therewith? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a motion, if we could have a vote on approval of the agenda as amended with the four motions.
Bullock,
Yes.
McMillan,
No.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
Yes.
and Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
It's 9:43 a.m. and you have an agenda. At this time, Ms. Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You have just been listening to Dr. Michael Rice, Chairperson of the State Board and State Superintendent. To his left around the table is Board President Dr. Pamela Pugh from Saginaw, NASB Delegate Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, Ms. Nikki Snyder, and Ms. Kelly Kuzmano, the 24-25 Michigan Teacher of the Year. Now seated to my right is Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, Board Co-Vice President Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield, and Board Secretary Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Joining us virtually today is Ms. Emma Young, the Governor's K-12 Policy Advisor ex officio.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. The public may register to provide comment during the public participation portion of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 1 p.m. to provide public comment by telephone. Please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage, www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed on the MDE webpage at www.michigan.gov/MDE. Board, it is 9:44 a.m. The first item on today's agenda is a presentation on the 2024-2025 Milken Educator Awards. On January 24th, 2025, I had the honor of surprising one of Michigan's great educators with the 2024-2025 Milken Educator Award. Luke Canine of E.F. Rittmuller Middle School in Frankenmuth School District is among the 60 honorees nationwide for 2024-2025. This presentation is to recognize Mr. Canine in front of the State Board of Education. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Michelle Harmala, Deputy Superintendent in the Division of Educator Excellence, Career and Technical Education, Special Education, and Administrative Law, Ms. Kelly Brozanski, Director in the Office of Educator Excellence, and Ms. Jennifer Roble, Manager in the Office of Educator Excellence. Also present with us in the room today to honor and support Mr. Canine is Grant Hagenauer, our superintendent from Frankenmuth School District, Ms. Christine Fry, our building principal at E.F. Rittmuller Middle School, Bob and Tammy Canine, parents and proud parents of Luke, and Krista Schuler, his friend. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Thank you, board. As Dr. Rice previously stated, the Michigan Department of Education had the privilege to honor a Milken Education Foundation Award recipient on January 24th of this year at E.F. Rittmuller Middle School in Frankenmuth. And for those of you, we've been at the table before, but for those of you who are not familiar with the Milken Education Foundation, Dr. Harmala is going to give a brief synopsis.
Thank you, Jennifer. The Milken Education Awards, created by Lowell Milken in 1987, have rewarded and inspired excellence in education by honoring top educators around the country with a $25,000 unrestricted award. Milken educators are selected in early to mid-career for what they have achieved and the promise of what they will accomplish. Recipients are caught by surprise when their names are announced at all school assemblies in front of cheering students, proud colleagues, distinguished officials, and the media. This award is frequently dubbed the Oscars of teaching. While the celebrity treatment is well-deserved, the awards are not about glitz and glamour. They are about bringing attention to exceptional teachers. The awards serve as validation, motivation, and inspiration to current and future quality educators. And I'll hand it back to Jennifer.
Thank you. Luke Canine is passionate about his community and students at E.F. Rittmuller Middle School, where he teaches Spanish and physical education to students from 6th through 8th grade and works as a part-time behavior interventionist at the school. With an emphasis on social emotional learning and a tailored personal approach to education, Luke ensures that his students challenge themselves and have the tools to achieve their potential. In physical education, Luke encourages students to work to achieve personal records instead of competing and creating in an environment where every child feels supported. Also, as a Spanish teacher, Luke infuses innovation and fun into his lessons, encouraging students to increase their language skills while building their confidence. Luke's empathetic and solution-oriented personality suits him in his role as a behavior interventionist. He helps create a discipline, policy, and social-emotional learning curriculum, works with students on behavioral improvement, and monitors grade checks. He stays up to date on the latest developments in restorative practices and discipline, attending conferences and presenting at professional development meetings. Also committed to supporting his colleagues, Luke mentors teachers and initiated a wellness challenge that encouraged colleagues to take walks together and work in teams to better themselves, physically and mentally. Luke earned his Bachelor's of Arts in Secondary Education from Alma College,
Go Scots.
In 2013, and Master of Education, Educational Leadership and Administration from Grand Canyon University in 2022. Now, I would like to take a moment to show the video of Frank Muth's own Luke Canine receiving the award.
It is a great honor to stand here before you today as we come together to celebrate our community. Your presence here reminds us of the shared purpose that brings us all together, the success and well-being of our students.
Can we take a second to give a big round of applause for all your teachers in your school? Now, we have a special guest today, Greg Gallagher, the Senior Program Director from the Milken Family Foundation.
Teachers are the backbone of every distinguished school such as yours, and only if we elevate the teaching profession will talented students like all of you consider a career in education. And that brings me to the exciting news, the secret of why I'm here today. This year, Milken Foundation staff have been traveling all around the country giving Milken Educator Awards to outstanding educators. And one of the best teachers in the entire country is here in your school. The recipient will receive a financial award. Do you want to know how much? Abigail, how much is that?
That's $25,000.
And the Milken Educator Award goes to
Mr. Luke Canine.
This wouldn't be possible without the teachers I had, the coworkers in this building, and all of you and all the students that came before you. Honored, and I'm just shocked, but thank you. Mom, what's going on? Is Dad around?
Yeah, he's right here.
Okay. We had assembly today, and I guess it was all about me. I won a national award, and received $25,000.
Are you pulling my leg?
No, Mom, there's a bunch of cameras in front of me right now. There's a bunch of people around. I am sweating profusely. I love you guys.
Love you too, baby.
Dr. Rice, I'd also like to thank Dr. Pugh and Dr. Pritchett for joining us that day to support Luke. And I'd also like to offer Luke a moment to say a few words. Right up here.
Nope, you're right here.
Okay. So I would like to extend a thank you to Dr. Rice, Dr. Pugh, and Dr. Pritchett for making January 24th one of the best days of my teaching career. I'd also like to thank my mom and dad, Bob and Tammy Canine, for guiding and supporting me throughout my life. You've established a work ethic that I have and influenced how I approach adversity in everyday situations. I love you both, and I'm so grateful for having both of you to look up to. You have been great role models. Thank you to my beautiful girlfriend, Crystal Schuler, for supporting me when I needed the most. Thank you for being my person to lean on during the tough days and also encouraging me to start new clubs and try new things, even though it would take time away from being home. Teaching and coaching requires a lot of time, and I cannot thank you enough for being there for me when I feel I have no more energy to give. You inspire me to work hard and to recognize the beauty in this universe. Receiving the Milken Educator Award has been an extremely humbling experience, and I'm so grateful for my teachers, students, coaches, and friends that have all made this possible. I'm thankful for the Frankenmuth School District for giving me the opportunity to make a name for myself. I've worked alongside incredible educators that have molded me into the educator that I am today. Frankenmuth gave me opportunities to coach, teach, and lead. E.F. Richmuller Principal Christine Fry, thank you for guiding me through some of the challenging times in my career. And Superintendent Grant Hagenauer, thank you for seeing potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. You are one of the reasons I stand here today, and I strive to be leaders like you one day in my career. I'm honored and humbled to be recognized at our state's capital, surrounded by people who work tirelessly to do what is best for our school systems. Thank you all for the part you play in improving public school programs. It is truly an honor to be in a field that has the opportunity to impact the future of our state and our nation. Thank you.
Dr. Rice, I'd also like to take a moment to thank Christine Fry, the principal, and Grant Hagenauer, who is actually transitioning to Bay City Public Schools. He gave me permission to state that. So I want to, hopefully we'll get to Bay City next year.
We're planning.
Okay. But they have been great, and they are probably the two people that have kept this a secret throughout my tenure doing this, and they told no one but each other. So I wanted to really say thank you, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Would you like to give him the obelisk, Dr. Pugh and Dr. Rice?
You bet. Come on, go ahead. In the middle.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Harmala. Any questions about the Milken Award? I appreciate Dr. Pugh and Dr. Pritchett being there. One of the more fun days of the year, particularly when you get the opportunity to meet the honoree coming in, who expresses that it is his honor to meet you, and you get to say, oh no, the honor truly is mine. And 30 minutes later, I think that made more sense on the way in. Congratulations. We appreciate you. Keep doing great things for school children.
Dr. Rice, I will have to tell you what one other gravy on the top is that it was in Saginaw. So thank you for that.
Board, it is 9:57 a.m. The next item on the agenda is a presentation on March's Reading Month and literacy updates. This presentation will include students and educators who will share efforts on student engagement and the joy of literacy. It will be followed by an overview of MDE's 2025 March's Reading Month efforts, information on the Diversity in Literature webinar series to emphasize the how and why of literacy, and an update on Section 35M and Public Act 146 of 2024. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Delsa D. Chapman, Deputy Superintendent in the Division of Assessment, School Improvement, and Systems Support, Dr. Corinne Edwards, Director of the Office of Educational Supports, Ms. Denisha Rawls-Smith, Manager in the Literacy Unit in the Office of Educational Supports, channeling her former middle school self. And from Grant Middle School, Sandy Morris, our Media Specialist, Jamie Pressler, our Principal, and students Anna, Lamaya, Angel, Lucia, and Max. And we're sorry that our grade 5 teacher, Ms. Gessler, is not feeling well today and cannot join us. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Thank you, Dr. Rice, and good morning, board. We're so grateful to have our guests with us here today, and they are going to be sharing with us their efforts. To take us into the presentation, we'll now turn it over to Dr. Corinne Edwards.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman, and good morning again. Aligned to Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan goal 2, today's presentation focuses on efforts to improve early literacy by celebrating and cultivating a joy of reading within our students. Again, Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan outlines 8 goals that, when implemented successfully, will support learning and impact life outcomes for learners across our great state. Goal number 2 is a key goal in helping us realize our vision for all Michigan learners, that they will have an inspiring, engaging learning environment that fosters creative and critical thinkers. Over the past year, the staff in the Office of Educational Support's Literacy Unit have intentionally focused its efforts on Goal 2 by providing technical assistance and professional growth opportunities for Michigan educators, all to enhance and support their readiness and ability to develop and maintain academic learning spaces that focus on addressing the comprehensive literacy learning needs of our youngest students, encompassing both the how and the why of literacy. Our goal today is to provide the board with an update of our current statewide efforts to support and move forward SCP Goal 2 through our March is Reading Month initiative, as well as provide a high-level overview on a couple of other key literacy initiatives. Our presentation today will include sharing from our 2024 March is Reading Month Spotlight School as the students share how they have kept the momentum going throughout this past year and how they expect to promote and celebrate March is Reading Month in 2025. We will then provide information on MDE's 2025 March is Reading Month initiative, provide an overview of our diversity and literacy webinar series, and conclude with updates on our continuing work efforts with Section 35M and PA 146 of 2024. I will now turn it over to Literacy Unit Manager, Mrs. Denisha Ross Smith, to take us further into the presentation and introduce our special guest today.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Rice. Good morning, board members. Today, we welcome students and staff representatives from Grant Middle School to the Michigan Department of Education. They are joining us as our student spotlight. Seated to my left is Sandy Morris, the Grant Media Specialist. They said she's the great Grant Media Specialist. And you'll hear more about her during the presentation, as well as Ms. Pressler, our Grant Middle School principal. To my right, you will meet Anna, you'll meet Lamaya, Angel, Lucia, and Max, and they will be presenting today. Grant Middle School will share reflections on their experience with MDE's 2024 March is Reading Month initiative and their current March is Reading Month initiatives. I'll turn it over to you.
Celebrating March is Reading Month matches our vision of developing leaders and readers. Reading is not merely for school, as is the rock personality growth and leadership development. Through reading, we expand vocabulary, learn language skills, and strengthen our brains, which are all important for communication and critical thinking.
Last year, our 5th and 8th grade students gathered in our library to accept the award from our lovely guests that visited from the MDE. It was a great opportunity to showcase the great things we do around literacy at Grant Middle School.
After the award was presented, our team took a journey through the middle school, the elementary, and ended at the primary center, where the adults got to experience a book celebration in Mrs. Vanderweide's class. This celebration was honoring the completion of young authors that published their very own books. The party was celebrated with noisemakers, cookies, decorations, and so much first grade pride. It was a great day to validate for our state representatives the amazing reading initiatives we do in our district.
One of the March is Reading Month activities at the middle school was the Book Face Challenge. The Book Face Challenge involves students selecting a book with the face on the cover and then attempting to align their own face with the cover to create a seamless integration as demonstrated. Several students loved this activity, producing impressive results. This challenge also encouraged students to explore books they might not have otherwise considered, broadening their interest.
This year, we are introducing Bookopoly, a creative twist on the classic game of Monopoly. Students have the option to play independently or with a group of up to 4 people, including staff. Each Bookopoly board features a variety of reading goals, such as reading a fantasy book, exploring a sequel, or reading a book with a specific colored cover. Upon completing the board and achieving all the designated goals, students will be rewarded with a prize, offering an added incentive for the reading achievements.
In my personal experience with the Bookopoly, I rolled for my first time and got the book called War Stories by Gordon Corman. It's a good thing because this might not have been a book I otherwise would have checked out in our library.
Grant Middle School is so blessed to have Miss Sandy Morris as their media specialist, as she is innovative, fun, creative, and loves books. Here are a few activities she has planned outside of March's Reading Month to foster the love of reading.
Students were able to create and submit bookmarks for a bookmark competition. Here are a few of our winners. Our students are able to take bookmarks when they check out books. I entered the contest and it was fun to see who would win. In February, students had the opportunity to blind date with a book. This was fun for kids because they might not have chosen one of these books based on the cover. This is a great risk to push our readers. Each book is wrapped in construction paper and taped on with the back is a conclusion about the book. As the students unwrap the book, they get to see what the book is about. The last 2 pictures were the Who's Got the Feels initiative. We know books are full of all kinds of big emotions. This gave students a chance to connect through the lens of emotion.
As my experience through middle school, Miss Sandy Morris has made Who Got Caught Reading, which is when a student reads in classrooms and the teacher notices them reading. As they read, the teacher passes out slips that can be revealed at the library for small prizes.
Es importante fomentar convertirse en un lector de por vida en Grant Middle School.
Becoming a lifelong reader is important to foster at Grant Middle School.
Hay tantas oportunidades de lectura para nuestros estudiantes, compañeros de lectura, lectores libres, visitas a la biblioteca, lectura en silencio, inmersión dual, lectura en todo el plan de estudios. Son algunos de los grandes acontecimientos en las escuelas públicas de Grant.
There are so many reading opportunities for our students. Reading buddies, readers to leaders, library visits, silent reading, dual immersion, reading across the curriculum are the few of great things happening at Grant Public Schools.
Somos muy afortunados de tener oportunidades tan maravillosas.
We are so lucky to have such great opportunities.
Miss Gessler is our 5th grade teacher that entered our district into the competition. She couldn't make it today due to sickness, but she starts class with this saying.
What is this class all about?
I want to read and write.
Why?
I want to be an effective communicator, an effective collaborator, a content master, a critical thinker, a creative innovator, and confident in my abilities.
We know that this is what we wish our students leave us with each and every day as they leave the classroom. Thank you for the opportunity to share why we do what we do at Grant Middle School.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for inviting us last year to come and be with you. Dr. Edwards, myself, as well as Katie Dennis, who's sitting in the audience, thoroughly enjoyed our visit. We were very impressed with the dual immersion, which you can see these students are being immersed in Spanish as well as English, and it was just an awesome sight. So thank you so much for being here today. And we'll continue. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, I thought you were going to say something. We'll continue our presentation discussing more about March's Reading Month. The Michigan Department of Education joins Governor Gretchen Whitmer and all the educators around the state in celebrating March is Reading Month. And we have 2 main initiatives this month. Uh-oh, sorry. What happened? Okay, we're back. Our goal is to increase literacy engagement by sharing district and state initiatives. So you will notice last year we had the Michigan Reads Interactive activity, and this is how we met Grant. They submitted their Marches Reading Month activities to MDE. And what we decided to do is take the activities that we gathered and the plans and share them out across the state so that educators can learn from one another. Our second initiative is MDE Reads. It is back by popular demand. We are very excited for our leaders at the Michigan Department of Education, as well as our state board members, to join us as we go to local education agencies, so your local school districts and your schools, and read to children. We want you to take your love of reading, your encouragement, and your joy into the classroom. So we're very excited about bringing back MDE Reads. Also this month, we are hosting the Diversity in Literature, the How and Why of Literacy Symposium. It is a webinar series this year. So we're kicking off on March 19th, and we're blessed to have Mr. Dion Butler join us. Mr. Dion Butler, you may recall, testified before the House and the Senate committees when we were waiting for the K through 12 dyslexia and literacy bills to be passed into law. He actually stood with Governor Gretchen Whitmer as she signed Public Act 146 and Public Act 147 into law. A part of that webinar series, we will include the Literacy for All presentation, which is the MDE Dyslexia Handbook. So our literacy consultants will be offering that as well. And we have a total of 5 webinars prepared, and we will start again. That will be March 19th, so just next week. So far, we have a little under 300 educators registered to participate in that webinar. So we're very excited about that as well. And finally, we have a short presentation for you today, but finally, I would like to provide you some literacy updates. Since I was last at this table, we have been able to work with the Committee for Literacy Achievement to make the vendor webinar recordings and the request for submissions available to vendors for our Section 35M grant. So on our website, you will find the request for submissions documents, webinar recordings, a FAQ. Those were posted on February 28th, and submissions are being received until this Friday, March 14th. Critical evaluations of the submissions will occur between March and May of 2025. And just a short update for you on Public Act 146 of 24. We are continuing our technical assistance for districts. That includes our Michigan Department of Education and the MyMTSS TA Center providing professional development around dyslexia. We are continuing the MDE Dyslexia Handbook presentation, as well as encouraging educators to take on the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling training, which is ongoing. We thank you for your time today. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, presenters. We appreciate you. Board members, questions or comments? Ms. Snyder.
Thank you, kids, for coming and sharing your love of reading. It's very clear, it shines through. Appreciate your time. I do have one question, if you guys would briefly answer it. In learning to love to read, what was the most helpful?
In my opinion, probably the most helpful thing was the support from teachers and just the overall variety of books you could find in the library.
Anybody else? Share. What was the most helpful? If it was just one thing, you can boil it down to.
The most helpful, in my opinion, throughout would be how the teachers implement new ways and more strategies to help kids be more happy and want to continue on reading on.
I love it. Yes, can I get a girl? Speak up. One of you. Gotta have a good reason.
In the beginning of one of my classes, we usually read
Put the
for 10
microphone
minutes.
up to your mouth. There you go.
In the beginning of one of my classes, we read about for like 10 minutes.
Free time?
Yeah.
To read what is interesting to you?
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members? Comments, board members? Ms. Tilly?
Bueno, gracias. I just want to say that you all are very impressive and keep up the good work. And thank you for coming. You made our morning. Thank you.
Ms. Kuzmano?
So I'm a high school English teacher, and I'm very impressed because I don't even know if my high schoolers could stand here and be as eloquent as you all and speak in another language in front of adults. So you all are phenomenal and amazing. I just was curious, what's your favorite author or book right now?
My favorite author right now is probably the Wild Robot series that I'm reading with my mom and my little brother.
Good one.
Yeah, favorite book. It doesn't have to be a favorite author.
One of my favorite authors is April Henry. I like mystery books and like scary kind of books, so I like her.
Nice, nice.
I liked Gordon Corman's books. Any of his books, really.
For me, it would be J.R. Rowley, as she had a big impact on my life when I started reading Harry Potter, as it is one of the most famous books there are. And with that, I've been able to make new friends and everything else with it.
Thank you. One more.
What are you reading right now?
It's okay if you don't understand.
Wasn't ready to answer questions. Okay. Yeah.
It's okay. You're good. You're good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Boa?
I'm just very impressed, and I'm just seconding what everybody else said. I mean, things have changed. I mean, I watch my kids reading books. I grew up on the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, and so But I belonged to a group growing up called Junior Great Books, and so my favorite thing was Aesop's Fables. But because you're a Harry Potter guy, I want you to look up Ursula Le Guin, The Wizard of Earthsea. I'm gonna give you something to read.
Thank you, Senator. Anything more for the good of the group? Dr. Pugh?
I'll just repeat what everyone else has said. You all are outstanding. And just a question for you. We hear so much, we experience it ourselves, where social media is replacing the love for reading. And you all may not be at that age where you're really getting into social media, but what are your thoughts on that, and how do you plan to keep your love for reading and not be so influenced by social media like so many of us are?
Well, some of the things that I do is I either place time out of my day to get off and read, or even to keep my love for books. And I have a app of audiobooks to make sure I can still read books even if I can't have them right away.
I would just tell people to keep reading even if they want to play on their phone or something. And audiobooks can be good for you, like even though they're on your phone. Yeah.
But what if your battery dies? Right? What do you do?
Points well taken. Taken. I will apply those.
For me, it would just be get more variety of books so you can expand your knowledge off of them. But with the internet, you won't expand it as much and would just not be well for you.
Thank you.
Grant Middle School Literacy A team, you rocked it out. Give them a round of applause. 16, the next item on today's agenda is a presentation on Michigan's top 10 strategic education plan goal number 5 to increase the percentage of students that graduate from high school. Presentation topics include 4-, 5-, and 6-year graduation rates, demographic trends, and state and local efforts to increase graduation rates. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Delsa Chapman, backed by popular demand, Deputy Superintendent of the Division of Assessment, School Improvement, and Systems Support, and Dr. Michelle Harmala, also backed by popular demand, Deputy Superintendent of the Division of Educator Excellence, Career and Technical Education, Special Education, and Administrative Law. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Dr. Rice, thank you, Board, and tell me all of that isn't improving graduation rates, although it'll be a few years yet for these students. They were tremendous. So Dr. Chapman and I will be sharing the current data and strategic activities related to high school graduation for all students in Michigan. We're talking about our top 10 goal number 5, which is increase the percentage of all students who graduate with a high school diploma. Our presentation today will provide an in-depth look at the graduation rates for Michigan students over the last 10 years. We'll also share data for demographic categories, rates by ethnicity and gender, for students who are English language learners, students who are economically disadvantaged, and students with disabilities. Last, we will provide you with a brief update on the strategic efforts that are designed to increase the number and percentage of students who are graduating with a high school diploma. The good news is graduation rates are up. The statewide 4-year graduation rate increased by more than a percentage point to 82.8%, the highest 4-year rate since 2007-2008. 14 of 17 categories increased in 2024 over the 2023 rate, and 15 of 17 categories are higher than the pre-pandemic levels. And Dr. Chapman is going to share those details.
Thank you, Dr. Harmala, and thank you, Dr. Rice, and good morning, Board. The opening series of data slides focuses on the 4-year graduation rate for all students over the last decade. You can see here that the rate from 2014 to 2024 shows an increase for 8 of the last 10 years. A distinct point to share is that the 2024 rate of 82.8% is above the pre-pandemic rate of 82.1%. We will now share the trends on the 4-, 5-, and 6-year cohort year rates over the last decade, the past 4 years, and the immediate prior 1-year rates. Similar to the previous slide, graduation rates for 4th, 5th, and 6-year cohorts have increased over the past decade. Distinct highlights here include the 4-year rate being above the pre-pandemic rate, the 5-year cohort rate with a near 5 percentage point increase, and the 6-year being a 6.4 percentage point increase. Over the last 5 years, each cohort has increased by 1.0 percentage points, with the greatest increase of 1.4 percentage points for the 4-year cohort rate, as noted here. Over the last year, we see here that there has been increase for the 4-, 5-, and 6-year cohort rates, with the greatest increase being a 1.0 percentage point for the 4-year rate in particular. The next several slides will share our data stories specific to student groups by ethnicity, beginning with Black or African Americans. It is important to also note that this series of slides share the 4-year trend from 2020 to 2024 as an intentional means of analyzing rates at the onset of and post the COVID-19 pandemic. All 3 cohorts show significant increase over the last 10 years. The 4-year trend, while marginal, yields pre-pandemic rates for all three cohorts. Within the past year, all three cohorts show increase as well, with the 4 and 6 year cohorts rendering a near 2.0 percentage point increase. Similarly, Asian students have increased the past 10 years for all three cohorts with a near 5.0 percentage point increase. The 4 year trend yields pre pandemic rate increases, with each cohort being near 94% or above. A significant milestone for this group is the tenacious efforts of the 6 year cohorts at 90% or above over the past decade. Hispanic or Latino students have an applaudable, historic double-digit increase of 10.0 percentage points for the 4 year cohort, 10 year cohort change, and near double-digit increases over the past decade for the 5th and 6th year cohorts. The 4 year cohort percentage point trend shows an increase the 4 year percentage point trend shows an increase for the 4, 5, and 6 year rates as well. We conclude here with the 1 year rate for the 6 year cohort yielding a slight decrease. However, it is still above the pre pandemic rate. The 4 and 5 year 1 year change are both above 2.0 percentage points. The Native American or Alaska Native, as identified by Census Bureau count, shows increase over the past decade as well. In particular, the 4 year cohort has an applaudable historic double digit increase of 10.8 percentage points. The 5 year, just zero point 0.5 percentage points from a double digit increase at 9.5 percentage points, and the 6 year at 3.0 percentage point increase over the past decade. The 4 year and 1 year percentage point change shows increase for both the 4 year and 5 year cohorts. The 6 year cohort for this group for these time periods yielding a slight decrease due to its direct affiliation to the decreased enrollment for this student group since the 2015-2016 academic year. Here we see the Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander student group with decreases for the 10 year, 4 year, and 1 year percentage point change for all groups except the 6 year cohort with a 4.0 percentage point increase over the last decade. As with the previous group, intentional efforts of local education agencies to address enrollment and to provide services, resources, and support that assures presence and engagement to assist these students in working towards graduation. For 2 or more races, we see increase for all three cohorts, 4th, 5th, and 6th year over the past decade, as well as for the 4 year and 1 year percentage point changes. There are slight dips for the 5 year cohort, 4 year rate change likely due or attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the 6 year cohort for the 10 year percentage point change. White students yielded a near 3.0 percentage point increase over the past decade for all three cohorts, 4, 5, and 6 year. Both the 4 year and 1 year percentage point increase yields rates above those at the onset of the pandemic, again for all three cohorts for years 4, 5, and 6. Relative to gender, both male and female rates increased over the past decade for all three cohorts again. Males, however, show near double increase in 10 year percentage point changes in comparison to females for the four-year cohort. Research and reports over the past 4 years shows that females were more adversely affected by the pandemic than males. As such, you will notice that both the 4 year and 1 year percentage point change for females is either a slight decline or less of an increase in comparison to their male counterparts or peers. Moving on to English learners, they also show an applaudable, historic, double digit increase over the past decade at a rate of 10.8 percentage points, specifically for the 4 year cohort. The 4 year and 1 year rates for all three cohorts, 4, 5, and 6, show increases that are above pre pandemic rates. Relative to our economically disadvantaged students, we show an increase in graduation rates over the past decade, again, for all three cohorts. The 4 year and 1 year percentage point increases for the 4 year and 5 year cohorts yield rates above the pre pandemic outcomes. The 6 year cohort shows a slight decline for the 4 year percentage point change, likely attributed to challenges and barriers encountered by the pandemic. The 1 year percentage point change for this same group shows a 0.4 increase. For youth experiencing foster care, we will share the 4 year and 1 year trend data. While the rate of graduation is significantly lower than their peers, youth experiencing foster care shows an increase in the 4 year percentage point change of 1.1 percentage points. Efforts to provide greater support for students experiencing foster care continues to be intentional with a focus on providing services that provides opportunities to graduate these students with viable outcomes for their futures as we definitely lean in and hear their voices. Moving on to our homeless population, students experiencing homelessness show rates of increase over the past decade for the 4 and 5 year cohorts. The 4 year trend rates show decline for all three cohorts. This group was greatly affected by COVID-19 and is still forging through access and services as it relates to homeless families. These efforts of late have increased with intentionality and are proving to be successful based on the 1 year rates for all three cohorts, 4, 5, and 6 year, with increase of 1.0 to 2.0 percentage points. For the past decade, students with disabilities have an increased graduation rate for all three cohorts. The same holds true for the 4 year and 1 year trends and for both students with disabilities and those without disabilities. And now to Dr. Harmla, who will share a summary of the data just presented.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman. When we last shared this presentation approximately a year ago, 13 of 17 categories were higher than in 2019. This year, 15 of 17 categories are higher than that same year. That's a celebration. We are moving graduation rates. The 4 year statewide graduation rate summary includes rising numbers, the 11 of the last 13 years, with more categories of students graduating. Again, 15 of 17 categories having higher rates than pre-pandemic. We also have more work to do. There are differences in the categories of our graduates, and that needs our attention and that of our local districts and our ISDs. Dr. Chapman is going to start with one of our efforts to address graduation rates.
Thank you, Dr. Harmala. Here we will share and highlight our efforts as it relates to EWIMS, or the Early Warning Intervention and Monitoring System. As we have shared in the past, we want to highlight here that this is a 7-step research and evidence-based approach with a process of examining very specifically data and decision making at the local level that provides supports and interventions to help our students to get back on track and definitely to succeed. In addition to the foundational effort of EWIMS, we want to highlight today that MDE has developed an EWIMS implementation support network to provide training and support to schools and districts around this great state of Michigan. As noted here, we have 43 schools that are being supported by trained coaches. 17 of the 43 are districts currently, are schools, I'm sorry, in a district currently under a partnership agreement with MDE. These trained coaches work directly with partnership agreement liaisons, which we affectionately refer to as PALs, and they work alongside and directly with ISD staff to coordinate collaborative support efforts as it relates to being intentional with EWIMS in these specific schools. Schools identified by way of the School Index Accountability System used here in Michigan receiving EWIM services will be observed, as noted here on the slide, over a 3-year period with the intent of monitoring graduation rates in particular. Additionally, we are excited to share today that the EWIMS core team will study data from 154 self-reporting districts to identify increasing trends specific to attendance and graduation rates. Self-reporting indicating and meaning that these districts have self-propelled or on their own initiated and implemented EWIMS to the advantage and for specifically addressing attendance and graduation rates. There is intentionality through the EWIMS developed model to collaborate with ISDs to continuously provide training not only to the 43 schools, the 154 schools that are self-reported, but to also to expand these efforts across the state. And now to Dr. Harmler to share additional efforts.
Dr. Chapman, another important effort that has had a positive impact on graduation rates is our personal curriculum. We've shared some of this with you before. The personal curriculum is a tool for modifying the Michigan merit curriculum by individualizing graduation requirements for students. The Office of Educational Supports works in partnership with the Office of Special Education to ensure that the personal curriculum is understood as a tool that increases graduation rates. The department has provided numerous trainings to ISDs, local districts, outside agencies, and others to support understanding and use of the personal curriculum. The personal curriculum is available to every high school student as needed. And I want to point out the last bullet. Over the last 2 years, our department has provided personal curriculum consultant who has provided 126 trainings to ISDs, 157 trainings to local districts, and 52 trainings to outside agencies. While the personal curriculum is available to any student, students with disabilities have an unlimited flexibility in the modifications that can be made to the merit curriculum. Specifically, any of the merit credits can be removed. The personal curriculum team must be thoughtful and cognizant when developing a personal curriculum for a student with a disability, as well as all other students. Significant consideration must be given to the student's post-secondary goals, meaning for a student with disability that the personal curriculum must align with the student's educational development plan, commonly known as the EDP, and their individual education program, or IEP. Modification should be in the area of the student's disability or identified needs. Failure to align these documents may result in modifications that actually limit a student's ability to progress toward their post-secondary goal. So we want to keep those items aligned and thoughtful. For example, if a student wanted to be a carpenter and they intended to attend a trade school, we have to consider what would be the impact if we removed Algebra 2 completely from the merit curriculum for that student. So we need to think about it tied to their post-secondary goals. There are 4 types of personal curriculum options. Types 1, 2, and 4 on the slide are for general education modifications. So students who want to earn additional credit in core subject areas may waive a credit in a non-core subject. We can modify the mathematics credits for students who do not require the highest math standards to meet their post-secondary goals. And number 4, modify the Michigan Merit Credit for students transferring from out of state or out of country, and those students must complete 2 years of high school prior to that transfer. Option number 3 is for students with an IEP. The requirement makes clear that the educational development plan and modifications in the personal curriculum must be consistent with the IEP for that student. The IEP team would be helpful in informing the development of the personal curriculum to ensure alignment. The personal curriculum has been used over the years, as you can see. It has increased from 9,656 students in 2017-18 to 12,617 in the 23-24 school year. While a slight dip in number, it's the same percentage for this year as last year. The personal curriculum objectives are to ensure that students, families, teachers, counselors, and administrators understand the flexibilities they have with the personal curriculum. They also need to know why we continue to promote the personal curriculum. The goal is to enhance the relevance of high school and the high school experiences as they relate to each student's post-school goals. The personal curriculum designs the Michigan Merit Curriculum to be aligned with the needs of an individual student and maintains the integrity of the diploma while allowing flexibility in how students demonstrate knowledge in the core content areas. We also have a series of graduation guidance documents that support understanding of best practices and strategies that support graduation for students. Volume 1 was provided and released by the department in November of 2022. The department looked into researched and evidence-based practices that increase graduation rates and included those items in this guidance document. It includes absentee intervention, academic enrichment and tutorial support, the importance of extracurricular engagement, and mentoring. We released volume 2, which was focused on middle school students at the end of February 2024. This includes personalization of learning as a key strategy as it supports the sense of belonging and connectedness to school. Recent research validates that a climate and culture within a middle school setting that promotes engagement in learning ultimately leads to high school graduation. There are 4 elements in this particular volume: strategies, again, to promote attendance, personalized learning, mentoring, and out-of-school time learning. We are working on the 3rd guidance document for elementary students. We know that a strong start supports a strong finish. It's never too early to talk about graduation and continued education. The particular guidance document we hope will be released in the spring, and it covers systemic approaches for setting a solid foundation for achievement, creating welcoming environments for students, families, and community members, fostering healthy student and relationships, and the impact of student success on graduation. Another strategy is the post-graduation opportunities information packet. We shared this with you, board, back in August of 2023. It was Public Act 88. We were calling these the PA 88 packets for a while. We've kind of dropped that now. The particular requirements in that legislation require the department to make available to all schools and school districts a packet that includes occupations and public service opportunities for students, advanced educational opportunities. Those would be things like early middle college, advanced placement, college level exams. It would include career and tech ed, among other options, and educational opportunities after high school. We update the packet annually and ensure that districts provide that to their students in grades 8 through 12 annually. And this packet is developed in partnership with the Department of Labor and Economic Growth, and we are leveraging their Pathfinder tool. The link is on that slide if you'd like to look at it again. To promote the packet and enhance district knowledge, we've presented this packet at a couple of different conferences, primarily focusing on our counselors to help them understand the tool and how to use it for students. We've also included career and technical education staff across the state. As you can see in this slide, we are getting a lot of hits on this website. They have increased. Look at 2022 and look at 2024. Significant difference in use. And then the last part there, the Pathfinder Roadmap link completions. You might wonder, what is a roadmap link? It really is the student's opportunity to map out their path from their post-secondary goal desire to what it would take to complete that. So it includes the colleges they might attend, approximate 30-year earnings, the median wage for a particular profession they've selected, the occupation's description, and the licenses and credentials that are available or required. A student does not complete that link until they've finished the path and sent it to another person. So it's typically their teacher or counselor, or if it's an adult, it could be a Michigan Works coordinator. So we appreciate the opportunity to celebrate with you that our graduation rates are up. Again, if I didn't say this before, 15 of 17 categories, that's a big celebration. And our strategies are definitely helping to move the needle on graduation for all of our students in Michigan. Dr. Rice, back to you.
Thank you, Doctor and Doctor. We appreciate your presentation. We appreciate the good news as well on Goal 5 of the Top 10 Strategic Education Plan. Board members, questions or comments? Senator Bullock.
Thanks for the presentation. I just had a quick question about the curriculum. How is it initiated? Is it a request from the student, or is it identified from the counselor or the education? Like, how does that work?
Any of those. It doesn't have to come from a staff person. It can come from a student. It could come from a parent, but we have to work together to complete that.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Pugh and Ms. Guzmano.
Thanks for the presentation, and this is great information and much to great news and good to celebrate. And I have definitely been sharing the good news. Question that came from a parent as it relates to certificate of completion versus high school diploma, and what opportunities there are for students with special needs to get additional years of service and also complete with a diploma.
So is the question you want to distinguish between the two?
Distinguish between the two, and if there is opportunity, because there are parents who do want their children to have a diploma, but they want them to be able to have the additional years of services.
Right. So once a student with an IEP completes the graduation requirements, they would receive their diploma. That would mean they exit the public school system with all other graduates. A certificate of completion is generally a pathway that is not pursuing all of the merit curriculum requirements, and that student, if needed, is eligible for their service up through the age of 26. Does that help?
Yes. And I guess what the parent is asking, is there a way to blend the two? And what they're suggesting is a and B high school diploma, and they've cited some of the states who maybe provide that pathway.
Yes, currently Michigan does not. We have a diploma, That's what we offer for graduation. Certificate of completion is a way to celebrate a student's exit and achievements within the school system, but it's not a diploma.
And have we considered that? Have we considered those opportunities, I guess?
Not in my 2 years. I don't know if it was pursued prior to that, but I can share with you not in my 2 years.
I can ask further.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Ms. Guzmano.
My question just comes as a high school teacher in this post-COVID landscape. What we see a lot of times is a lot of like changes to where kids have gone to school. You know, like they might start their freshman year somewhere and then they drop off our grid and they show up somewhere else. How does the state kind of track that in terms of graduation rates? Do you know what I mean? Like if a child, like say they do 9th, 10th, and 11th at a school, but then their senior year, they either, you know, go to a virtual school, go to home, you know, like they change their education platform. How does the state kind of keep track to know that they've graduated? Or is that just come down to that it just happened? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
So as shared earlier with our data in terms of cohorts, all students are assigned to a cohort. In partnership with CEPI, CEPI is responsible for all educational data within the state of Michigan. So in working with certification of data that's shared with CEPI from ISDs who support our locals, there is a mechanism in place where we do know when that student is moving, because again, each individual student is assigned to a cohort. So it's a matter of process in making sure that documentation is properly carried out in the time where in which reporting is given to CEPI.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Cumano. Other questions or comments from board members? Dr. Pritchett.
Thank you for the presentation. In particular, thank you for the emphasis on personal curriculum. The times that I was able to be in any of those meetings, I found them to be very focused on the students who are normally struggling for a myriad of reasons. And so I am pleased that they are being used and that the department is working with schools to help them understand that they are viable and that students should be given that opportunity, especially as they near graduation and maybe along the way things haven't gone smoothly for, again, tons of different reasons. Question, do we in Michigan track students after graduation? By that I mean, how many might go into straight into careers, military, college, and I understand that once they get into college, that might be just their freshman year, and then they're going to rotate out to something else. I've read a couple of articles where some states have at least attempted that. Doesn't sound as easy because of, mobility, et cetera. I just wondered whether Michigan has done that or has ever considered that.
There are some specific tracking systems, Dr. Pritchett, for example, specific to CTE completers and other programs. In general, we do not, at this point, I believe, have that data, but we will check into any prior efforts and possibly moving forward if that would be a possibility and share it back with the board.
I appreciate that. And the Pathfinder, that can't be tracked by schools per se. XYZ High School has so many students who have used Pathfinder. It's more by students.
It's by user, and users don't have to be students. They could be, you could go in and be a user of Pathfinder.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchett. Ms. Tilley?
Thank you, ladies, for the presentation. I'm happy that we're moving in the right direction for closing the achievement gap. And I'm happy that we're moving in the right direction with the other ethnic groups outside of the African American community as well. Of course, I'm concerned about the foster youth decline. I know that we did a big push the year before the graduation rates went up. So I'm wondering if how much that advocacy that we were doing played a role. And I mean, outside of the department, we were doing advocacy. Um, I really believe that I already believe that that was a factor. And then with the rates going down and the advocacy not being at the level it was, that may be part of it. Um, I also would like to see raw data for the graduation rates. So the numbers of students and the numbers of graduates for those 4, 5, and 6 years. Because we know percentages, it the raw numbers would help. I really like the EWIMS using that data so that districts can see what's going on in their community that's holding their students back, and they can tailor programs for it. So I would like to see more of the categories for the EWIMS. What are the different categories for EWIMS?
Okay, yes, we can share that with you, Ms. Tilly.
Um,
And by categories, you mean the early warning categories?
yes.
Yep.
And then I think it would be great to have model school districts at the table as well as in the guidance. Like, what are the creative tactics that some of the school districts use when they, to improve graduation rates? And those could be great lessons for other school districts. We need to get those messages out, whether it's, in the trainings that MDE gives, whether it's newsletters, whether it's social media, doing video, what we need to promote those positive things that are happening in those districts and making sure that the message is getting widely spread so that other districts can adopt those methods. And then when with the funding that was allocated from the legislature, there was an organization, Dr. Rice, that got funding for achievement gap research. Which organization was that?
I'm not sure.
There was an organization in that, like I said, got funding. I wanted to know. I would like to get a report from them if possible, if they could give us an update on some of the research that they're doing and their findings.
We will research their research.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tilly. Other questions or comments? Mr. McMillan.
I guess through the chair, I would just like to ask Member Tilly regarding, do you think that maybe as far as graduation rates of foster students, that maybe we could increase that by helping with the transcript issues? I mean, I think that could be a focus, that how much of them are not being able to graduate simply because we don't have a good system to help them with the transcripts.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know there is not a necessarily statewide mandated system. I know parchment is something that some of the districts use. But there is a huge issue, ongoing issue with the transcripts, and that really needs to be figured out because a lot of the districts are losing those transcripts, and it just has me in awe that they are losing transcripts.
Yeah.
But there should be, where they have 48 hours or whatever time window to make sure that those transcripts are given, and they may need guidance on how to keep the transcripts, and we need to create some type of system.
Yeah, I agree, and so I'm just hoping that maybe to MDE staff that maybe that is an area. I mean, it may not increase it by numerous percentage points, but it certainly would increase it to some degree and have a huge impact on kids that should be graduating that can't.
And it's holding back for months. Sometimes those kids don't get their transcripts.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the discouragement when you're already transient and you're having all of these obstacles and you're fighting to get your transcripts. That's big. And then also the parental rights issue, where parents are not listed and they still have rights to follow up about their child's education, and they want to. There are a lot of parents that want to and are not able to because of, like I said, they're not listed, and there's just it's just not good with the record keeping for whatever reasons. Information is not being passed. So,
Thank you, Ms. Tilley. Other board members?
and thank you, Board Member McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Other board members? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much for that celebratory moment. I want to acknowledge Ms. Anne Marie Mapes, Special Assistant for Dr. Chapman, who's had a fair bit to do with our graduation guidance, so we appreciate her. Doctor and Doctor, thank you so much for your presentation and for your good news.
Thank you.
Board, it is 11 o'clock. The next item on the agenda is a presentation on the value of sequential music instruction for all children, especially in grades pre-K through 5. This presentation will focus on the value of music education instruction as well as efforts to support music education throughout the state of Michigan. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Ryan Shaw, Associate Professor of Music Education at Michigan State University, and Karen McAvoy, Executive Director of the Michigan Music Education Association. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required, but we do have a resolution to consider later in the meeting. Presenters, welcome.
Contain yourself, Mitch. Contain yourself.
Yeah, so we want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Superintendent Rice said, I'm Ryan Shaw, Government Relations Coordinator for the Michigan Music Education Association, and this is Karen McAvoy, our Executive Director. I'm also a music teacher educator at MSU, and Karen's a fabulous elementary music teacher in East Lansing Public Schools. And today we'd like to talk a little bit about the value of music education, why it matters, some good things that have been happening in the state in terms of policy and funding, and what could happen to further strengthen music education.
So yes, thank you again for letting us be here today. We want to talk about, first of all, some of the things that make music education so special and important. Music education exists in roughly 90% of American schools nationwide. Music programs give local communities points of pride. They support local businesses. They provide opportunities to build community within school districts. They support student engagement, provide outlets for student self-expression, and provide places for students to feel like they belong.
We also see positive spillover effects time and time again from participation in music to other areas of schooling, both specific correlations to cognitive skills and test scores, and really a broader sort of transfer to school readiness and motivation within the school. Researchers have found time and again that local sport is a key part of music program health as school boards and administrators and caregivers make the key decisions about the music they'd like to see in their schools. These are crucial to determining instructional minutes in the schedule for music, teacher FTE for staffing, spaces for instruction, and funding for instruments and curricular materials. But we also find that state policy does matter. For example, when Lansing schools cut all of its elementary music and art teachers in 2013, it was a local policy move, but it also happened because state policy at the time around teacher assignment allowed for non-music teachers to teach music at the elementary level. So put simply, local decisions are most important for health of music programs in Michigan, but state and federal policy shapes conditions for these local policy moves.
So we want to take a look at the Arts Scan at a Glance, which tracks policy markers at the state level. So this slide here, which is really difficult to read, shows how every state is doing based on 13 different markers. But if we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see Michigan is way down at the bottom there. We do supply early childhood arts education standards, which is great. We have elementary and secondary arts education standards, although they are in need of updating. And then if you scroll way over, you'll see that we do also have arts requirements for high school graduation, and that we have arts requirements, alternatives for high school graduation. But out of 13 different points, those are the only 4 that Michigan meets.
We have some specific data from a study I completed a few years ago that speaks to access to music education in Michigan. Based on 2017 to 2018 data, we found that about 82% of public schools were employing a certified music teacher. More recently, the MI Creative State Report, just released, includes updated survey data of districts around the state. And we see some similar top-line numbers for music, and you can also see how music compares to the other arts areas in the state.
Definitely something to celebrate.
Absolutely. Both studies showed good access, but also that access is not equitable in every school or for every student. These types of schools in the study I conducted were statistically significantly less likely, for example, to have music teachers. We also specifically found in Michigan, again, the spillover effect positively between presence of a music teacher and a music program and higher test scores, for example, which I always caution, obviously, is not a specific causal arrow that we can draw. Although in this case, this was a strategy, a research study using a causal inference strategy to control for other factors, and we still see this correlation present.
So to talk about a few other things that we want to celebrate within our state, we are really lucky and thankful that our state has supported the Section 33 Arts Education Grants. In 2013, this grant, 2023, I'm jumping back a decade. In 2023, the grant supported 11 districts who did not have any music education programs, and helped them hire certified staff to teach based on a series of high standard criteria. The language for those grants was, the boilerplate language for that was renewed in 2024 to allow for some of the unspent funds to be spent and expanded. And 28 districts were able to either start music or visual art programs, or the language also allowed for programs that were perhaps under those standards to be raised up and meet time criteria, materials criteria, certification criteria, things like that. So we are really, really thankful that 39 districts throughout our state have been able to add or increase their access to music and visual arts education through these grants.
Michigan will also use these funds to support MI Creative Potential, a collective impact initiative of which MDE is a partner. As they launch a data platform called Artlook, Michigan's going to be only the 3rd state to adopt Artlook, which is going to allow for effective collaboration between schools and community arts groups and teaching artists. And that's an exciting thing that's happening. We also think a positive policy point that's been maintained is that the visual, performing, and applied arts credit requirement in the Michigan merit curriculum has been maintained, even despite some pressures sort of over the past years for more sort of flexibility in that area. However, we do still see that not all schools seem to be saying that they're offering the arts that are required as part of that 1 credit graduation requirement. This comes from, again, the Creative State report that just was released. And the numbers don't look too different than the last time we looked at state level data, which would have been around 2011, 2012. We still see that lack of supplying of music and other arts areas in some high schools. So we have a lot to celebrate, things that are going well in the state, but we also think that there are some things that could be prioritized now. When we look at those policy marker dots on our state profile, we think that we could focus in the years to come on getting more of those dots in place. There's been energy in the state over the past 5 to 10 years to support, for example, a specific K-5 instructional requirement in the arts. We're one of about 7 states that doesn't have such a requirement. We obviously are thrilled about the Section 33 arts education grants, and that work project has been going really well, offering thousands more students in the state access to arts education. We'd like to continue to seek that support. We're also interested in encouraging legislators to restore a full-time arts consultant position in the MDE. Ana Cardona, I think, was the last person to hold this post until her retirement in about 2012. Lots of other states have a person who's full-time in this position and is a member of the State Education Agency Directors of Arts Education. It's a really long acronym, CDA. And so we think that a person in that role could collaborate with the other people around the country as part of CDA, could continue to work with MAIA, the Michigan Arts Education Instruction and Assessment group, on various initiatives related to MI creative potential. We talked about the fact that the arts standards in Michigan haven't been updated in almost 20 years. We're lagging there. So those are some ideas that we have for ways to go forward. We want to thank you again for the chance to talk, and we're obviously happy to have some conversation around music education in the States.
Thank you, presenters, board members. Questions or comments? Dr. Robinson.
I'm passing on to my colleagues here.
We're waiting on you.
Following your lead there, brother.
Yes.
Very good.
I won't wait because I love what you guys are doing. Slide 11, it talks about one research study. And you've referred to the spillover effects of music education. I really think it's central to achievement, not a spillover effect. So, I was just grabbing my phone and looking for like a meta-analysis of the research that's available. And if that doesn't exist out there, then I think that one of the things that the creative, you said Michigan Creative Arts Committee, is that what it is? Should potentially be partnering with higher education institutions in Michigan to pursue that research, right? Because I think there are a lot of students that even if music isn't their thing, by being present in their education, they're more present in the other parts, like you said. And there's multiple ways you can look at why it's not just a spillover effect, but it's central to students actually showing up through times that they otherwise wouldn't, and keep them engaged. So I don't know I know you just referred to one study, but we need a body of research. So
I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, I can talk about the specific meta-analyses in this area a little bit. So, Project Zero from Harvard University has been maybe the most sort of dogged in looking at this across arts areas. And generally what they find are statistically significant correlations, biggest for what they call near transfer effects. So what I mean by near as opposed to far transfer would be, for example, study of music and early literacy skills, which they would say near because a big part of listening, a big part of learning to speak and be literate with home language is the phonetic awareness, and specifically the skills that teachers are working on with word segmentation, word starts, word ends, phonetics, phonics, and music seem to be really closely related, right? That's an example of near transfer. There's less correlation, for example, between study of music and early math skills, which makes some sense because they're not as closely related cognitively. But then we still see, even besides those transfer skills, the broader school engagement skills and school readiness um, come up in lots of studies of specific programs, not just about, say, a sequential music program, but arts integration programs where classroom teachers are working to integrate the arts areas into instruction. We see a lot of positive benefit in terms of bringing community members into the schools, kids feeling like they've got, multiple input points, groups to be a part of, reasons to come to school. So yeah, I support your assertion there. The main reason I pointed to that one specific study was because those are Michigan centered, but I think you're right, there's room for more.
Thank you, Ms. Snyder. Ms. Guzmano and Senator Bullock.
First of all, I knew that you had to be an elementary music teacher when you spoke, because I was like, that woman can like talk over a whole slew of children. But I just wanted to, I think for me, so I have two daughters that are in middle school, and as I've watched them and as I've been a teacher, like, I really think that one of the things I see is that there's usually one music teacher or one choir teacher in a building, even the building in my district that is quite large, and it makes such a difference. More than any other subject, I see that the impact of one specific teacher can make or break a student's involvement in the arts. And I know at Rochester, Dave Urig is our music teacher, and he's phenomenal, but he works all the time. I mean, it is more than a full-time job than even I take on. So I think I want to lift that there really is kind of a burnout capacity to this part of the teaching profession more than others, and it also has such a significant impact on students and their trajectory. So I 100% value and support everything you do with two daughters of my own, and I played flute in high school. But so I really think that impact is great, and I also think sometimes the significance of the hours in a day and the inflexibility of scheduling plays a role. I know when I was in high school, we had 7 hours to our school day, so I used one of those hours for the arts. And the older I get, the more I realize what an outlier that is, that most secondary schools don't operate with a 7-hour day. And I just think sometimes we get into such a mode of how a schedule should be. And I just think that there's room for flexibility. So I think you're both amazing and should be just trumpet around the whole district. See what I did there with the trumpet? Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Guzmano, we appreciate you beating that drum. Senator Bullock?
Thank you, great presentation. Following up also on like just the one teacher, right? You got just one teacher for school size of whatever. At the same time, we have, oh, my mic's not on?
Thank you.
We have one teacher in the school who's overworked, overloaded, and that hour is like something the kids look forward to, like gym or recess. Who, does the teacher create the curriculum, or is there a standard curriculum? Because I like watched how, like, when I was in school, and I had piano and did a whole bunch of other stuff, but I was kind of forced into classical, even though I asked for up-tempo music. I had to play Tchaikovsky, et cetera, right? And that's boring. At some point, you want to play the boogie woogie, right? And then my kids, they're when they were in school, they had a choir teacher, music. They didn't get to really play instruments, but they got to sing. But it took a while from them going from like elementary to middle school to have input into what they could sing versus what they were told they had to sing. And so I don't know, like how does that curriculum work, or how do we design that, or the music teacher has to be flexible, because hip hop was told it wasn't music when I was growing up. That's not music, and so it's #1 genre. So
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, first of
I have
all,
something to say.
I want to apologize to you for whoever told you that. that hurts when I hear that. There is no state music curriculum. Music teachers, music educators, when they're in their undergraduate programs, are taught about our state standards and our national standards, which again is one of the reasons why I do think it's important that we update those standards, because they are so outdated at this point. But teachers use those state standards as their guide, and then there are a variety of commercial curriculums available. Teachers in their undergraduate programs learn about different methodologies and can apply those different methodologies in their teaching. I will invite all of you, I'll put it on my calendar to send you invites next January to come to the Michigan Music Conference in Grand Rapids. The things that are happening in the music education field right now are nothing like what they were, and teachers are extremely aware of the need to include student voice and student choice in the classroom, the need to provide representation and equity in the classroom. All of these things are happening, and even active teachers who are not currently enrolled in classes are coming to our conference every year and attending sessions on all of these ways that they can make their classrooms more inclusive, more welcoming, more student-centered, things like that. So, so the direct answer to your question is we don't have a state curriculum, but we use our state standards as the guideline.
One thing I just want to add too, because some folks from Maya, Michigan Arts
Oh,
Education
yes.
and Instruction, are here, and we have seen over the last 12 to 13 years with MDE support a lot of really great resources developed through that project that still not enough music teachers know about, but there are resources for a blueprint for quality arts education programs. So they describe things. This is kind of similar going back to the early 2000s about the opportunity to learn standards that were drafted at the federal level that describe, what needs to be in place for a healthy music program or arts program to thrive. So that blueprint document exists to guide districts in the state. There are assessment projects of all scopes and at all levels that are really engaging. Music teachers from around the state collaborated to create those, and they're still flexible enough that, if I'm a teacher and my classroom is dying to, work with Kendrick Lamar as the model today instead of, as you said, Shostakovich, they accommodate those different genres and curricular materials well. But as Karin said, the instructional design is still happening at that local level, and there are pockets of progressive, moves to open up the curriculum in music, and places where it still looks pretty traditional.
And then you had the slide that really slapped me, but I knew it said the urban schools, charter schools, and the disadvantaged communities of color. Usually, there is no music instruction. Is that a question of, was that a philosophy, or like at a time that just like that's what like, let's cut music, let's cut sports. What was there, like, was that like a mandate, like, for the urban communities, or like how did that
Mandate.
become
Well,
that
what-
district's choice? Or
Yeah, the philosophy was to starve districts financially, and local school districts had no choice but to cut as a result of that. So the cuts in the Lansing School District, and if the former superintendent were here, she's a friend, she would say that there weren't cuts, that it was just a change in who taught art, music, and PE. I disagree with her. I think it changed the experience for children to have art, music, and PE taught by K-5 teachers. But those changes, those cuts, were a function of cuts financially in the state. Remember, we were dead last in the country in total revenue growth, inflation adjusted, for a 20-year period. And the nadir, no Ralph intended, of those cuts was 2011, when we had a nominal $470 per kid cut. We cut $6 million in my district, and we were a growing enrollment district. Reflect upon that. Lansing School District, which at the time was roughly the same size as we were, was not fortunate to be a growing enrollment district. It was a declining enrollment district. So it had to cut more severely. So that was the context. It was not walking away from the arts, although the arts were most assuredly walked away from. It was born of financial necessity, which is an outrage. And I didn't read about it in a book, I lived it. And so too did many of the people in this room.
I'm a digress at that point.
Can I add a coda to that? As long
Thank
as
you
we're
for the
doing all of
question,
our
Senator. I
music
appreciate
puns.
that.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah.
Along with funding issues, and we've talked about this at this table for months and longer than that, there's also been a pretty significant narrowing of the curriculum.
Exactly.
Right? And a lot of that is driven by what I would say, our obsession with test scores, with standardized test scores, primarily in two subjects, in reading and math, and primarily in third grade. So we are determining state policies, national policies, on the test scores of 9-year-old kids in two subjects, while the rest of the curriculum gets short shrift. So I think along with, as Dr. Rice is pointing out, significant cuts in funding, which means schools are trying to do at least what they're doing with less, if not trying to do more with less. That in some districts, and I understand the motivation, I understand the concern. You've got less money, what can we do with that money? And we have to try to meet the needs of as many students as possible. In some places, and you're pointing out the ones that I think we should be the most concerned about, music, art, physical education, and I would add social studies, library services, psychologists, nurses, all the other things about schooling that make it important have been diminished and have been sent to the sidelines and marginalized. So I think along with better funding, as we've been seeing in the past several years, I think we also need to take a hard look at what standardized testing is doing to the quality of schooling and to how we use those precious dollars that we have. I think what you've heard from our presenters, who did a fantastic job, by the way, are that a lot of subjects are really important. Music is one of them. I don't think anyone here is suggesting that music is the most important thing. I wish we'd get away from deciding this and this are the most important things and everything else is subservient to it. Because I don't think that's how kids approach it, their schooling. I don't think that's how parents send their kids to school, to be only worried about one or two subjects. They want their children to be well-rounded. They want them to be exposed to a variety of different things in school. We heard from the kids this morning about how important it was to go to the library and be able to find books that spoke to them. I think we need a serious discussion about the purpose of schooling and how this narrow focus on test scores has kind of occluded what we think the purpose of schooling is. So thanks for the question, thanks for the data, and I wasn't going to say anything because I wanted the focus to be on my friends there, but I'm glad you brought that point up. It's really important.
And there lies the lesson.
So, so thank you, Dr. Robinson, Ms. Tilley, and then Mr. McMillan.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited that we are focusing on the arts. Arts definitely was big in my household growing up. It's big for my kids. I made sure I continued that. I served at the DSO on the steering committee and for classical groups. And one of the things that I did, because I knew that a lot of students did not have the opportunity to have the exposure, they would give me a couple of hundred tickets at a time for free to give out to different community members. And I definitely would take advantage of it as well with my kids. I think that those type of partnerships are very important. I don't hear a lot of those. I know you mentioned collaboration, so I think definitely collaborations and partnerships are important. Where the funding is cut, unfortunately, and hopefully we'll keep doing better. I know there were a lot of after-school programs and free programs, but the information doesn't get out. So I made sure if my children didn't have those opportunities in their schools, that I put them in after-school programs where they did have that exposure. And on a up note, I'm happy to say my daughter, she was a part of Mosaic. And so her dream has always been to open an art school. And she figured, with her young mind, she's 25 now. With her young mind, she thought, I can't do something like that until I'm 40 or 50 years old. But I told her that no, we're going to start your 501c3. So last year, I helped her start her nonprofit, and she has her first contract coming up in the summer. So you never know with the exposure what kids can do, will be. So it's really important that we expose them to the arts. Um, I want to know, what can we do to change the standards? How do we start working on the standards?
We're actually going to be sharing a set of standards with you relatedly soon. So we look forward to that conversation. Yeah, and more to follow in board brief, but I'm happy to share more.
Perfect.
Yeah, you
Thank
bet.
you.
Mr. McMillan?
I just wanted to address the idea that it was all funding, and to exactly what Dr. Robinson was talking about is what I was thinking as well. I was a state rep back in 2009 to 2014 and talked to local superintendents, and the ones that didn't just espouse the mantra of more money, we need more money, but actually wanted to talk about solutions that they could do with the large amount of money that they had, and the bloated bureaucracies. It really was the high stakes testing. I think we've backed away from high stakes testings thanks to some of the leadership of this board and just common sense. I think back when NCLB was a big issue, back when we had a governor that of my own party that was threatening to close schools based on test scores and all the other things that were making it high stakes testing. I'd go talk to local superintendents and ask them specifically, why is there no music? Why is there no art? And they said, it's not on the test. It's not on the state test. And we need to make sure that we do well on the state test. And so those things went by the wayside. Now, how do you get them added back now that I think we have gotten a lot less high stakes testing. So I think they could add those back. It's just, you'd have to get rid of one or two of the assistants to the deputy assistant director bureaucracies that superintendents and those kind of like their buddies and don't want to let them go. But I think that if there was a focus on getting that back, they could find the money. There's plenty of money in the system right now. And if they could just use it more efficiently, like it was their own instead of other people's money, then I think that we could definitely see a resurgence of and a comeback to where we were pre-high stakes testing times.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan. Other reflections, Dr. Pritchett?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Two examples, things you might, and I know you've heard these before. Back when I was an assistant principal at a high school, chronic absenteeism. One student in particular, we couldn't get that student to come to school. Mom, dad, me, counselor. And all of a sudden, the music teacher heard her sing. And we had her. We had her every day. In fact, there were nights when her mother would come and say, she needs to come home now because she wanted to be in that music room. So I know that's not the answer to everybody, but it certainly, I think, rings true for many, many students. There was a feeling of being safe there, and then everything else came together. The other thing is on Friday night, I had the opportunity to go to high school band festival. And if you need an argument for at least high school students, when they have to do the sight reading, 5 minutes in a room, have not seen the music before, that entire symphony band sitting there going, okay, the clock's going, and together, the teamwork that goes in, and the band director then trying to lead them down the path of, okay, let's remember this, let's remember that, and when 5 minutes is up, they have to play it, is pretty awesome as far as I was concerned. So anyway, so if you are looking for an example of, okay, what difference does this make? You know, they're not going to play the clarinet when they're in college, or it's not going to change their SAT scores. Well, I would argue with them that, yeah, I think maybe it might in one instance. So thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, those are really good examples, good barometers of health of music programs to see groups, on display like that, collaborating with each other, digging in, working hard. I was a high school band teacher in a previous life, and it was stressful and exciting to watch them do that. So.
And I think the importance there is that those foundational skills begin at the elementary level to develop those skills to be able to do those things. And the elementary arts programs are not always as visible as the middle school and high school programs are with those concerts and festivals.
One reflection I did want to say, too, drawing on some other comments, is that, Lansing 10 years ago was a high-profile example of big cuts. What's more common is a hollowing out. We see attrition, people retire, and before long, there's one music teacher traveling to 6 buildings, and to your point, that leads to some burnout, that leads to people moving from that district to a district where they don't have to travel, making those decisions, and over time, then we get to a place where we may have, in Kalamazoo's, more itinerant teachers or something, and, a worse arts experience for students because of that. So we have to be mindful of the sort of gradual erosion that can happen within certain programs.
Any other comments or reflections? Thank you, Dr. Pugh.
And mine really is a reflection and going down memory lane. I remember I was the only person in my family who didn't play an instrument. I was the flag girl in drum and bugle corps, and made it to the second in charge, but I did not pick up. I played the piano for a little bit. But when I think about our communities, when I think about like Buena Vista School District, the high school, if you look at that rich history, I went to high school with Alvin Level, who's now the band director at Central State. He started, we went to school at what is now the Center for the Arts and Sciences, SASA, one of the top schools in the state. It was CAC then. And he played the saxophone then, but anyway, worked his way all the way up, and now a very well-known, highly regarded band instructor in the country. And Buena Vista High School, when you look at the history there, that school district was dissolved. Looking at Saginaw School District, which, by the way, when I'm looking at statistics, we're 49%, the highest, 50% almost, child poverty rate in the state. But we're holding on to our music, being known for music. We had one of the best choirs. We've had one of the best bands. We still have a really good drum line, and that builds community. I was just at a program where the drum line was in the church and was performing. And so it's an outlet for students. It's something that community builds around. Going to a historically Black university, I mean, those are really centered on music. I mean, and so those are really good opportunities for children to get scholarship. I mean, and bands are like athletic programs in the South and around HBCU, historically Black colleges and universities. So anything that we can do, I do come from a family that's very musically inclined and works with students and works with the education system to make sure that where there's gaps, that there's opportunities to be filled by the community. So I guess just emphasizing, and I know we'll have this conversation later, just the importance of music on every parts of community, and how it's an amazing pathway for students as well.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Anything more for the good of the group? Once, twice, thrice?
Oh, I want to say
Please.
to add scholarships.
Mhm.
It's a great opportunity. My daughter got scholarships for theater, so that's another pathway to college. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Presenters, just a few last notes. So we're a music family, for better or worse. A violin, a cello, two pianos, and a person who dances to the beat of his own drummer. The $6 million of cuts did not include instrumental music at the elementary school. It was attacked, but it held firm in 2011, 12, and 13, and we appreciate that because we believe strongly that there's a value to that. And many of our kids are not going to get it but for in school. It is not going to happen. Minimally, it won't start but for in school. Whether it continues is a different story, but it won't begin if not for in school. So we felt strongly about that. Our test mandates, board members, just so people are clear, are federal test mandates with two exceptions in the state. So if you want to go after test mandates, let's have that conversation, but let's remember where those tests predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly originate. Let's also remember that they are 23 plus years in the making. So this is, depending upon how you count, 2 generations of American children that have gone through high stakes testing, from No Child Left Behind to Race to the Top to the Every Student Succeeds Act. And though it is gentler than it was 23 years ago, it is not gentle. And though it doesn't affect the curriculum in quite the same way, it still deforms the curriculum without excuse me, I'm speaking. I let you speak. I'm speaking now.
No, I just want to have a conversation about that.
We can have a conversation later. I do want to make one other point about consultants, if I could. When I came into the department, we were largely devoid of consultants in all areas, and we began to bring those back into the department. I feel strongly that that's a value and would welcome arts consultants. I think that there's a value to that. I also think there's a value to a library consultant. But to be clear, we hired a social studies consultant. We had none 5.5 years ago. A science consultant, 2 math consultants. I think there's a value to the department having that capacity, and we need to continue to build upon it. Board members, it is 11:41, and we're going to pivot later.
No, I want to talk now.
At 11:41,
it's
we're going to
simple.
pivot.
It's not even hostile.
We're going to pivot to
I'm
the
sure if
Michigan
I was a Democrat,
teacher.
you'd let me talk.
We're going to pivot to the Michigan, thank you, presenters. We're going to pivot to the Michigan Teacher of the Year presentation. We welcome Ms. Kelly Kuzmano, 2024-2025 Michigan Teacher of the Year, an English language arts teacher at Rochester High School, and Ms. Cassandra Eberhardt, Region 6 Regional Teacher of the Year, social studies teacher in Williamston Middle School, in Williamston Community Schools. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters welcome.
Thank you. And I get to say good morning, which usually does not happen when we do these presentations, but I'm thrilled to introduce Cassandra to the board, and I'm going to let her introduce herself more importantly.
Hello, board. Thank you for having me. I'm Cassandra Eberhardt. I teach 6th and 7th grade social studies, and I'm in the neighborhood. So I'm at Williamston, just up the street. It took me a little while to find my forever school, but I'm grateful every day to be part of such a fabulous community. I serve on the building leadership team, and I'm also the social studies department chair. And I'm going to talk a bit today about mental health supports for students in the classroom. And this should be a nice continuation of when Kristen Ritter was here, because she talked about those building-wide supports. And I'm going to talk about what that actually looks like for me as a teacher and for our kiddos in the classroom. When people find out that I teach middle school, there's often a pause while they kind of assess what my life is like. Sometimes it's a look of pity. My mom taught in the Cleveland Public Schools for 25 years, and her quote was, "You have to be out of your mind to teach middle school." And then I had a professor at Michigan State who referred to this group as hormones on roller skates. And to this day, I can find nothing more perfect. But I have not found a happier place professionally. I love the energy and the creativity and sometimes the lunacy that comes with this age group. I personally survived the middle school years with my own children, although it was a close call at some points, and you're in the thick of it right now. But my oldest is mostly off the payroll, and he's living his best life in Chicago. My middle is studying engineering at Michigan State, and then my youngest is going to graduate from Hazlitt High School soon. And one of the reasons that I'm very passionate about mental health supports is that my kids went through some significant trauma when they looked like this. And you would never know it looking at them today. But when they were this age, they lost their dad to suicide and then their grandmother just a couple of months later to a long-term illness. And I know that that's a very heavy thing to share, so I appreciate the space for it. But it gave me a front row seat to what trauma does to brains and what it does to children and what it does to learners. And it really affected all of my kids very differently. So my oldest got angry and he was in fights left and right. And I was on the speed dial of the associate principal. I wouldn't be surprised if she still had my phone number memorized. My middle got anxious. So even today with new situations, we have to kind of pep talk him through new scenarios. And my youngest just channeled a lot of that into perfectionism, and she puts a lot of pressure on herself. So it shows up for them in different ways. But the longer that I've been in education, the more that I realize that my kids aren't particularly unique. There are so many of our kids with stories of trauma ongoing and much worse than what my kids have been through. And kids are resilient, but they are resilient with support. They're not resilient to handle these things on their own.
And just to echo what Cassandra was saying, we certainly have seen the impact of student mental health in the classroom. Really, these disorders that are listed at the top of the slide are the ones that we very commonly see in all of our classrooms. Like, I cannot think of a classroom where I didn't have at least one student who either was diagnosed or maybe I suspected but hadn't received an official diagnosis. And those behaviors are ADHD, which you can see on the slide, affects 9.8%, according to estimates for children ages 3 to 17 years. So 9.8%, which translates into about 6 million children. Anxiety, and I would say that anxiety level has risen since this estimate because our estimate is from 2016 to 2019. So I would definitely say that that is higher. But as on the slide, it's 9.4%. Behavior problems, which is kind of an umbrella term, but you know, you might see that show up as oppositional defiance disorder. You might see that simply as just, we might see increased behavior referrals in the classroom. That is 8.9%. And I would say that can vary depending on the age that you teach, the subject that you teach, the time of day you teach, and even the month you're teaching. I mean, that is a wide umbrella term there. And then finally, depression affecting 4.4%. Again, I would say that's an undercount, but affects approximately 2.7 million children according to the study that we've cited.
And there's been a lot of pushback to this idea online because when we call teachers superheroes, it's unrealistic, right? We're human beings. But I have seen too many things to not think that this is true. So when students are struggling emotionally or socially, like teachers are the first line of defense in the classroom, and we're good at it. I have seen colleagues close gaps in pandemic learning. I have seen colleagues curate friend groups with a seating chart for isolated kids. I had a student a couple of years ago who was struggling with attendance, and every 2 days in a row that this kid showed up, he would tell me the snack to bring him from the gas station. I had a student with really awful anxiety, and she didn't want to leave the counseling office. And every day I met this kid in the counseling office, and our routine was I would have an affirmation on a sticky note for her. And after she made it through her first class, she was working for a Hello Kitty sticker, and we would celebrate that every day. Is it ever about the stickers or the snacks? No, it's about the connection and the relationship. So we're good at that. Teachers are magic makers in the classroom, but when we have students that need that next level of support, what we can do in the classroom doesn't replace the expertise that comes from our mental health professionals.
And so that leads us to kind of the next part of this presentation, which is the staff supports for secondary students. That was a mouthful here.
Yeah.
In a post-COVID education landscape. And I'm going to show you a graphic here that I think is important because it really does kind of show what we're dealing with. And I wish there was like easier to zoom in. Can I zoom in? There,
Oh,
whoa.
look at that.
Here we go. Okay, so we really see that in Michigan, I mean, our guidance counselors and support staffs are really crucial to the teacher relationship, but their numbers are high. And I would argue in secondary schools, they have a two-pronged issue. Like they have two hats they have to wear. One is the future of children, right? Like what are they going to take for classes? What does graduation look like? What kinds of jobs are they going to enter in? That's one whole part of their job. And then we also ask them to be this emotional support, these connections, these bridge to what we can do to help our children. And that makes their job incredibly difficult. And you can see here in Michigan, the ratio is high. The average is 598 students per counselor, and that is a lot when the recommendation, as you see up here, is 250 students to one counselor. But I would also say that we have seen increased funding in this area since the pandemic, and we need all the support. We need all of the people. So we're going to show you what that looks like at our two different buildings and districts.
So these are the trained adults that we have to support students at Williamston. And this is the fourth building that I've worked in. And all of the buildings that I've worked in have a similar structure, but not the similar like student body. So the fact that we have all of these adults for 440 students is remarkable, in addition to a full-time social worker. And so much of this comes down to a numbers game, because when I need support for a student in the classroom, I can pick up the phone and one of these people will answer. And I don't take that for granted. I don't take that for granted because I've not had that in another building. So what does this look like? I might call the school counselor and say, hey, I have a kiddo who's working through a panic attack right now. Are you able to sit with them? Yep, absolutely. I had a student a couple of years ago, and anytime he would get frustrated, he would throw everything onto the floor. And I was like, dude, we've got Chromebooks. What are you doing? But our school social worker was available to meet with him consistently to identify the feelings that he was having, to identify those triggers, to ask for help. And then one of the things that I love is that we have a fully staffed responsible thinking classroom. So when students are struggling behaviorally, gone are the days where you can just send somebody to the principal's office and wash your hands of it. But students will go and they'll make a plan and they'll reflect on their behavior and how their behavior is impacting their learning and other people's learning. And it's such a reflective, restorative piece that I appreciate. And because we have a fully staffed classroom, we can also offer students the opportunity to take a chill break for 5 minutes throughout the day, which is just wonderful. So if kids are overwhelmed, overstimulated, tired, sad, they can ask for a chill break and they can go to this classroom and play a round of Uno with a caring adult, or shoot hoops for a little bit, or color. It seems so simple, but 9 out of 10 times that kid is coming back to our classrooms regulated and ready to learn. And those are skills that are going beyond our classroom walls, right? We're teaching kids about self-awareness. We're teaching them strategies, and we're teaching them that it's okay to ask for help. And those are things that we're all still working on in adult life, right? So I really appreciate that our district has put such intention behind the staffing of our mental health supports. And no system is perfect, but I feel like we're creating a system where kids have to work really hard to fall through the cracks. And when I talked with our superintendent, Dr. Spina, he talked about our mental health supports going hand in hand with school safety, right? Are we meeting the needs of every child that we possibly can when we can? So I feel really grateful to have such great supports for kids.
And I'll echo that with at Rochester High School, we have a much larger student body, right? We have 17, I had to double check on this because it varies, but we have 1,789 students this year. So it's a much larger population. We have 2 full-time social workers. We have 6 school counselors. I will add that we only in the last couple of years have added an additional counselor at each of our high schools. So that was definitely a result of increased funding that we were able to take advantage of that. We have 1 full-time school psychologist, and then we have 2 academic interventionists. Now, those 2 academic interventionists are really important because they staff what we call our LC, which is our learning center, and that is a place where students can get academic, but I would also argue social support during the school day, say that they are struggling in a class and the teacher cannot provide that kind of academic intervention that is needed. They are able to go down to the learning center and we have these staffed academic interventionists that are able to work with them. We also have a similar space in our counseling office where we call it the calming corner, where students can regulate, because that's what we're seeing is that especially in a post-pandemic world, the emotional regulation just isn't there. Like students need to almost be taught that, and we're not necessarily seeing at home sometimes, or maybe they're showing different behaviors at home. And then when they get to the school space, we're seeing some behaviors that maybe are not something they have shown previously, or maybe something that because of the increased rigor and the increase in academic outcomes that they feel like they need to have, we're seeing that. So we have a calming corner where students can just take a minute, like I kind of echoing Cassandra, like 5 minutes, and kind of put themselves back into play. And it's right in our counseling office, so they can have that support. I also think, again, the team approach is so valuable. At Rochester High, we have a principal and 2 assistant principals, and they work very closely with our social work, school counselors, psychologists. The whole team comes to the table to try to help kiddos with parent involvement for how we can best make them successful. And I just think that is so important, but we need the attention from everyone in the state that these are still things that are happening and that we want to have that team model. We need the funding for that team model, and we need the support for the team model for all of our districts so we can thrive and be successful as teachers. Other additions to add? And then I'm going to transition to what I've been doing around the state. I got to visit Greenville Public Schools. That's Kristen Ritter, Region 3. So those are 3 pictures kind of in the corners there. I also, along with the Michigan Association of Student Councils, we had our annual regional conference where this is really an interesting conference. I would love for any state board to come and show up because high school kids from around the state show off projects in their schools. So they might show off pep assemblies, they might show off service learning, and they get to present that to other students. And then we get to beg, borrow, and steal any cool projects and do them at our own school. And then on the left, Rochester Community Schools was super excited to feature Governor Gretchen Whitmer, at one of our elementary schools in light of the Lions playoff game that we won't talk about too loudly, but it was super exciting to have her come visit our elementary school kiddos. And what I thought was a hilarious exchange, she went into an elementary school principal and they commented on her lipstick shade. 5th graders just, have just all the opinions about what you're wearing and doing, and it was on display there. The middle picture, I will have more forthcoming, but I was just back a couple of weeks ago from attending the first National Teacher of the Year convening in Santa Clara, California. And I think what I want to talk about more at a later date was just the fact that it was 56 teachers. They represented all 50 states, 6 U.S. territories, and even a state teacher of the year from the Department of Defense. And I think that that is just an incredible experience, and I thank the state for giving me that opportunity because I'm learning and growing a lot through that. And we had a fascinating conversation about the most unique reasons that your school gets called off. So snow pales in comparison to schools in Maine that get 2 weeks off for the potato harvest, among other things that I'm learning. So thank you so much, Dr. Rice, for that opportunity, and we look forward to questions and comments from the board.
Thank you very much, Teachers of the Year. You know, potatoes have eyes on many different things. Couldn't resist. Ms. Tilley.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to reiterate, I think a board meeting or two ago, I talked about how far we've come with special needs children, and we still have far to go. But when I was growing up, the answer to behavioral issues, whether, people didn't know sometimes if people were special needs, they could be high masking. So the answer in Catholic school was the barbecue stick being paddled. So I'm so happy that we've come very far from that day and age. One of the things that I don't hear a lot, and you briefly mentioned, was the parent engagement piece, which is so important because if you are teaching SEL or other techniques in the classroom and you know how to manage some of the issues that the children are dealing with and helping them to regulate, but the parent doesn't know how to reinforce that at home, that's a big issue. So wanted to know more about what you guys or you ladies are doing for parent engagement and to educate our parents.
I think anytime a student is showing like emotional need in the classroom, we bring in the parents right away. So it's just getting to know that student, like what are they like at home? What are the strengths that that student is bringing? What helps them when they're escalated? And then just explaining some of the strategies, because a lot of the parents don't know that we offer things like the chill room, right? So for me, it's just bringing in the parent immediately when that student is showing signs of distress, so we can have that team effort.
I would say for me, I often think of in a classroom, I am not just a teacher, but I'm also a detective. So, what do you do when you are a detective and you're trying to solve a case? You reach out to the people closest to them. So, my first email, first phone call, first anything is going to be to home, because to me, that is a needed piece for how I'm going to pivot as an educator for the best way to help, support, or assist a student in the classroom. And I think for a long time, I think there was this kind of, we're so busy, right? And that we might not have the time. And I think both as a parent myself and as an educator, like parents are my first place to communicate and my first way to figure out responsibilities that I have. And I think schools have gotten a lot better about that increased communication. We still have a long way to go because there's so many facets to a school day, but I would say that is my first line. I also think it has really helped for our counseling staff to reach out for parent kind of presentations, so we're all on board. On Thursday, Rochester High School will do what we call our 8th grade parent night, right? Because that's a huge transition from the middle school, where it's a smaller school, to 1,700 students. So we have a presentation and it starts in our auditorium, and the first people that they meet are our counseling staff. So alongside our administrators, they're meeting them, and I like that approach because it says, yes, academics are important. Yes, there's other things that are important, but the first thing we want you to know is who's going to guide your child through these 4 years. And so I think that's another way that our school has approached that issue.
Are there any suggestions that you ladies have for MDE perhaps to give guidance, or things that the districts can do, strategies for not only parent engagement, but training?
That's a really good question. I mean, I would say that we just need to have more points of contact. And I think that we need to have more of, when this behavior happens in the classroom, what could be behind it. We need that kind of knowledge, right? There's a lot of self-help books, right? You can listen to podcasts, but I think we need practical situations. And just like teachers have tools in their toolbox, we need to kind of open the door to parents and what they can do at home to reinforce. And that goes with increased communication with parents. So I would love to see just more practical conversations that include real life examples, because I'm an example gal. And so for me as a parent, putting on my parent hat for a second, that would really help me to see, okay, this is what's happening in the classroom. This is what I could do at home if my child is showing any of those behaviors. That's me in a dream world.
I think that as educators, it's important for us to understand ACEs and trauma-informed practices and SEL and all of that. But I think it's so important and impactful and powerful for parents to understand those things too.
100%.
You know, they don't have to be experts in it, but to have an overall understanding and how trauma impacts their children, and things that they can do to help at home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tilly. Other folks who care to share? Senator Bullock and Dr. Pugh.
Great presentation from our teacher of the year, and I have a lot to say about behavioral wellness, but what I'd like to know is in the interventions that you guys are using, how does the other students receive? Like I'm all about it's okay to not be okay and normalizing it so no one gets stigmatized with any of this stuff. So like in the school when someone goes to the chill room and the others, like how is the rest of the students receiving when folks need that time out or they're getting an interventionist or that they're seeing the therapist and other students know when someone gets put out the class or going, and if I see where you're going, I know you've been there, so.
We're pretty sneaky. We get pretty good at being kind of stealth in the classroom. And at all times, I know that I'm asking myself, am I preserving the dignity of this child in every interaction, right? So even when a student is struggling with behavior, like, am I preserving their dignity? So when students come up and ask for a chill pass, it's usually just quiet, and I will just sign it, and then they take it. And enough students do it where it's really not stigmatized. So it's just quiet, a lot of quiet conversations, I would say.
I'm going to answer slightly different because I'm at the high school, right? And I would say that these students that I've seen in the last few years are much more aware and well-versed in mental health, like their own mental health awareness, than students that I had at the start of my career. So I would say that they are very in tune to the fact that kids or even themselves need things, and they are not shy about sharing it. And that was not the case at the start of my career. I think it was much more stigmatized, and they have language now for what they're feeling. They will say their feelings, and if they're not feeling in a certain type of way, or if they notice something, they're much more likely to bring it up. So, sometimes to the detriment, like they're a little bit loud, but I think that that comes from a place of concern and awareness much more these days than it was at the beginning. And I think, unfortunately, it's because of a rise in the school violence that we've seen. These children were raised in that environment. So they are much more aware of things that might not be okay or might not be safe, and they will say something, whether it's to a staff member or to each other. And I think that for that, I celebrate that. But that is at the high school level where they have much more of a language for these things.
All right, yeah, thank you. I mean, because like, remember Tilly said, like, so, behavior is either punishment, and as you got older, is criminalized. There's a difference between it being an epidemic or some therapeutic intervention, and we arrived at that. I mean, there's progress. So I'm always in the middle of that, and I got a kid with anxiety. I got another kid who, he's he feels like he has to be the one that lays the justice when there's no justice in the area. But, so then that gets them in trouble. But now that they're older, they've kind of parceled it out, but but
That tension.
knowing what I know and then knowing how we are to operate now, there were easier conversations versus he's out. You know, like my mother wouldn't allow anybody to kick me out of school. So single mom just wasn't having it. So she basically threatened the school to keep me in school.
And you know what? To echo what you said, I think we've become much more skilled in not suspending. Like we really think about thoughtfully about what the behavior is or what the disciplinary issue is. And yes, we might need to do a schedule change. Yes, we might need to, provide supports with like supportive friend groups and the like. But we're become much more adept of not just sending you home with no kinds of conversation or toolbox to be able to handle that. I would like to think we've come a long way from that era.
And thinking about what skills are lacking. So when we see behavior issues, what skills are the kids missing that we can teach? And that's just a huge shift.
I swept and mopped a lot of halls.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock. Dr. Pugh?
First, let me thank you, Ms. Everhart, for starting off, in a vulnerable moment, sharing with us. And some of us don't get out to communities as much as others of us do that see how trauma impacts children and the needs of our children. And so thank you for bringing that to our table. I loved what you said about children are resilient, but with support. I've often said, resiliency comes at a cost, but I appreciate that resilience, but with support, because a lot of people like to put that period there. Children are resilient and they're there to fend for themselves without knowing the stories that are going on in these communities or the stories that with your three children. So thank you for that. Looking at the numbers, I know Ms. Kuzmanos and Ms. Everhart.
Detective Kuzmanos.
400 students, and then Ms. Kuzmanos, you said 1,800 students that were getting those. Are those students getting the services, or are those students in the class that are there at
Our school's total.
Yep, total enrollment.
So imagining some of our schools, like Saginaw, Flint, Detroit, Benton Harbor, that have a greater percentage. Again, I was just sitting here looking at child poverty rates. And then we could also look at children who are seeing crime rates quite a bit. And just imagining what those type of supports that you had listed under would exact on a district. So just thoughts there for what you're providing with the number of students that are getting services compared to what some of these other districts are seeing.
Well, can I also say, just lifting up what you said about these other districts, is you have to consider the educators in that space as well. And I think that is something that we see is when you have a lot of students with trauma that's impacting the classroom, you also have teachers that kind of have a choice to make. Do they take on all of that trauma themselves and risk, all the emotional repercussions of that, but then also might be living in that same community and having those same lack of supports as well. And I would argue that we need an increased amount of support, because I think until you're embedded in the classroom every day and the community that you're living in and the factors that are both visible and invisible, right? You can't get enough help. You can't have enough people attuned to the goings on of that community. And I can't possibly even put into words what that kind of day in and day out toll that it takes. So I 100% echo, and then would even double it for the teachers, the administrators, the counselors in those environments that just have, probably could sit up here and talk for hours.
And that's such a fundamental base of the pyramid. I know that I've been able to focus on curriculum and instruction in Williamston in a way that I have not been able to in other districts because I have that support. So it all works together.
I could say so much more, but let me just say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pugh. Presenters, thank you very much. We appreciate that you believe in chill breaks and calming corners. And we are going to find our chill breaks and calming corners now. It's 12:13. Board will be back at 1 o'clock for the afternoon session. Thank you.